Hello, my friends, and welcome to Perfect Practice. If you're into health, which I know you are because you're a holistic practitioner, if you're listening to this because a friend shared it with you or because I personally shared it with you, you're definitely in for a treat. Today, I have with me Carrie, and she's going to be taking us through some amazing information about how to tap into your biology in a way that will unlock a whole new level of health. Carrie Bennett is an amazing human being. And what prompted this conversation is seeing her all over the place, sharing her wisdom and also the work that she's doing to help practitioners get this information into their hands, into their hearts, and into their practices. So without further ado, please welcome Carrie Bennett.
Thanks for having me, Sachin. I'm so thrilled to chat with you.
Well, it's been my pleasure to set this up because I'm so excited for our conversation. And I want to approach this from a beginner's mind because my intention is to share this not with just clinicians, but I can already think of a few clients just based on our conversation before this that can immediately benefit from this information. So, just so our listeners can get an understanding of where you started, maybe you can give me, we'll put your bio in the show notes, but maybe you can give me kind of a 60-second understanding of where your journey starts and what you're so excited about these days.
So my journey started in a very traditional medical model in an undergraduate education. And I knew something was missing. And I knew it was missing just because, yeah, and I distinctly said this too to my mentor at the time when I had to make a decision on what to do. I said, who wants to be stuck in a lab under artificial light and or fluorescent lights all day? Like there was something about that. I was studying microbiology at the time. I was like, there's something about that that just didn't quite feel right to me. And that led me to this path of becoming a personal trainer, going to massage therapy school, getting a master's degree in clinical nutrition, and then having my own health challenge that ultimately led me to the light, right? And to talking to people about circadian rhythm and quantum biology and all the many rabbit holes that could lead us to, I guess.
So who is your first, like, was there a video that you watched that sparked this interest, or how did you stumble across it?
Yeah, so one night I was up really late, scrolling on my phone, just had this feeling that I was missing something. And so I turned to good old Google and and I found a blog post from Dr. Jack Kruse, who is a neurosurgeon who really connected so many dots in what he called quantum biology.
Mm.
And those dots in that one article literally led me down a rabbit hole, both with his work, but then probably 24 other amazing researchers around the world studying how light and water and earthing and all these aspects essentially of nature really truly help our body heal. It's what we're designed to tune into to heal. And so that led me down a decade long journey now that I've been on to both tend to my own health, which I'm thrilled to say is now thriving, and then the many clients that I get to share this with as well.
It's so interesting because when you share what's necessary for people to do, it can seem so intuitive, and you're just like, there's when I explain, and we'll get into this, but when I explain some of these principles that we're going to talk about to clients, they don't resist. They're like, oh my God, that just makes so much sense. Uh, so with that being said, why do you think we've gotten so far off track in even functional medicine doesn't talk about this all the time, right? I know that when I started training in functional medicine, it was here's the survey, here's the test, here's the supplements, and then lifestyle kind of came. We almost assumed that people were doing the lifestyle, but a lot of them weren't. Most of them weren't, and then a lot of them think that some of the things that people do that they think are great lifestyle hacks, they could still be missing an important element, right? So they're doing a lot of good things, but just like a plant can't grow without, any sunlight, right? And we can't give it more water to compensate for the sunlight that's missing. Human beings have certain criteria, right? They have certain innate needs, and when those are answered, then and only then can the body fully thrive. So why do you think we're so far off base? And do you see things shifting, or do we just have to create a new world where this is the understanding?
You know, um, we've gotten so far off base, first and foremost, because it's been easy to live in a building with lighting of any time of the day. Light bulbs have been available to us. We could turn on those lights any time of the day. Um, We don't ever have to experience temperature fluctuations in the same way that we've experienced them if we were living outside with nature. So it's just been easy, right? And I, for, you know, 3.5 decades, didn't think twice about, like, okay, my lighting environment, or going outside. Every time I went outside, I actually went outside with the mindset of, oh, I gotta fear the sun, right? Let me put on my sunglasses, let me put on my
Mm.
sunscreen, let me put on my hat. And so it really, I think, just kind of what we've been taught, and the ease with which we've been able to kind of modify our environment to live indoors has brought us to this point. And now, when I teach people about how divorced we've gotten from nature, from the light dark cycles that we're designed to sync up with, from touching the earth with bare skin, all of those things. When I teach people about it, especially when I give a little bit of science behind it, because I think our culture these days really does like some of the science backing it. It makes sense to them. It's like, oh, of course, this is how humans were designed to thrive, right? These are the signals we absolutely need so the body knows what to do. And so I think it's just, over time, it's been easy to get into this tech-based living, this indoor living, and no one ever brought it to my attention that that was going to cause me health challenges.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that. And it just seems so obvious. Like, one of the things I was reminded of this past couple of days is that working out under blue light makes you more prone to injuries and creates hypoxia, and is actually detrimental. And so I had a guy that I was talking to earlier before we started our conversation, and he's like, I got to get to the gym in the morning, like do this, and this. I'm like, dude, you don't need to get to the gym first thing in the morning under artificial blue light. You're going to completely screw up your circadian rhythm for the rest of the day. And you might feel good in the moment, but later on that day or the next day, I mean, it's not going to last forever. So I said, instead, go for a walk outside, preferably in the woods, and tell me how you feel in a week, right? And see which one feels better, which one feels more intuitive. Because if you just think back to our ancestors, they wouldn't have done something like that.
No, absolutely not. You're absolutely right about that. I think we've really, when people start to take their health challenges into their own hands, I think the two things that we turn to most are nutrition and exercise. Um, and so I think there's this assumption that, oh, we have to get to the gym and we have to get that workout in at the gym in order to kind of check that box, right? Oh, I got my exercise in for the day. And having been a personal trainer, I owned a gym. I actually owned a gym up until COVID came around and shut everything down. And so I've had a brick and mortar gym for 15 years, and I can tell you now that I am in better shape, both physically and mentally, than having been taking my workout outside, making the majority of my workouts hiking in nature. And I don't, there's not one part of me that's like, oh man, I really miss waking up and going to that gym at 5:30 in the morning, to do that boot camp class, because there's something now about that my body says, oh no, that is not what your body needs, right? That's not going to set your signaling up correctly for the day. And instead, my body guides me outside as the morning light appears so that I can go for that walk.
Yeah, I used to be that guy that would wake up and go to the gym first thing in the morning. And just fairly recently, the switch has flipped, where it used to be that I wasn't okay with not lifting. I almost felt like it was an obligation for me to go into the gym 3 to 5 times a week and lift heavy stuff, right? There's a big like movement for that, as we know right now. Um, but that would come at the expense of me going for a walk in the woods in the morning, right? So what I decided to do instead is kind of flip the switch and not go to the gym first thing in the morning, and focus more on spending more time outdoors. So today I've spent about 2 to 3 hours outside. I did my last phone call outside. I did my 2 hours of work in the morning outside with my feet grounded. And you just feel different. And it's interesting because I also feel like time slows down as well. I don't know if that's a thing, but it feels like the day moves along so much more slower, and I'm more present to the day. Whereas when I'm indoors, because sometimes you just have to be, uh, the time just goes by so quickly.
Yeah, a lot of that I think has to do with the different wavelengths of energy we're connecting to, right? When we're indoors, we're surrounded by artificial light and non-native EMFs. The artificial lights flicker, so they're going at you like this, right? If you were to take a slow motion video on your camera of any lights, right, you're going to see that's a flicker that's being picked up by our nervous system. And then we have the Wi-Fi radiation. That's also a very high vibrating energy. So I think people kind of get into this fight or flight, go, 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 gotta get things done. It's like a frantic, frenetic pace. And I'm not sure if time changes, but I definitely believe the perception of time and our
Mm,
stress levels are very much different when we have an indoor workspace versus when we take the time to do stuff outside, because that's where we're under sun, or even on a cloudy day, that doesn't flicker. We connect our brainwaves to the Schumann resonance, right? That puts us in that really creative present mindset, right? Those present brainwaves. And so all of those things, I think, allow us to slow down for a moment, and just, I become way more efficient. The other benefit, which we can talk about, is that when we're outside, certain wavelengths of light are being captured by our eyes to produce norepinephrine. And that norepinephrine is a chemical that is designed to help us concentrate and focus. And so
mm.
I find that it's a lot easier for me to get work done in just at an easy pace, shorter amount of time, yet not feeling stressed out about it because of all of those things.
I love that. So we can go down so many different pathways with this. I'd love to know where do you like to start with your clients, or where would you like to instruct practitioners start with their clients?
Yeah. So for me, light and mindset are my foundations. And so let's talk about the light piece though. Oh, and the reason why, let me say why light and mindset are the foundations for me. And that's because there are two environmental inputs, or two epigenetic inputs into the body, that are constant. I always have light or darkness in varying degrees, and I'm always with my thoughts. And so the thoughts might be a completely separate conversation, but light is one that I think people can recognize thoughts, perhaps, but light's one that a lot of people don't think about. And that's the rabbit hole that I went down in terms of learning all about circadian rhythm, and how literally the light that enters our eyes and touches our skin is our main signal to tell our body what to do at various times of the day. I used to tackle adrenal fatigue in both in my own body and then also in clinical practice from a perspective of, let's test your hormones, let's supplement your DHEA, let's get you adaptogens, and I'm not saying any of that is wrong, but I never recognized that actually my hypothalamus and my pituitary gland, that HPA axis that's signaling things, needs light of a certain wavelength blend at a certain time of day to even kickstart that cascade in the first place. So
Mm,
no wonder my cortisol was flatlined. No wonder it was actually elevated at night. That's a whole different topic. And my melatonin was tanked, right? All of these things are dependent on light signaling. And so the reason I start with light is because when we signal light appropriately into the body through the eyes, we get a morning surge of cortisol into the bloodstream. And when we block the artificial light at night, when we have darkness at night, we get the surge of melatonin into the bloodstream. And those hormonal systems in the blood, plus the light through the eyes, all the other organs in the body are keying in on that. And they're saying, oh, it's morning. Let me optimize these functions. Oh, the day is waning. Let me switch to this. Oh, now nighttime is approaching. Let me turn on these repair and rejuvenation and regeneration pathways. It's all dependent on light. And if that is not the foundation, I don't care what nutrition or supplement you give, it's just not going to be as effective.
100% agree. And and I know you probably say this as well, is I remind people that when they're under artificial light, even if it's the right frequency or the right color temperature, um, it's coming from a constant direction. So how does the direction of light affect its impact on our nervous system and circadian signaling?
So in terms of the angle at which it's
Mhm.
coming at us, yeah,
Yes.
right. Yeah. So it's a very great question. And that's the idea that throughout, if we were outside, and let's talk about a sunny day, because I think it's easier for us to picture, but this happens regardless of it, whether it's, I know you live in a northern latitude, I live in a northern latitude. It could be cloudy, snowy, rainy, foggy, right? And these same things are going to happen, and we'll pick up these signals through our eyes. And it's this idea that at sunrise, that light is low to the horizon. And because it's low to the horizon, it contains certain colors, right? But that lowness actually is a signal that, okay, this is the morning time, and or and based on where the sun is in the sky, and we can actually tell whether it's sunrise or sunset. And so, okay, this is morning. Now when the sun's overhead, this must be in the middle of the afternoon sometime. Okay, now when it's back down at the horizon, that's evening. And when the typical lighting environment that we have these days is lighting overhead all the time, right? I wake up in first thing in the morning to use the bathroom, boom, those lights go on. I go to the kitchen, make coffee, start breakfast, overhead lights, at the office, overhead lights. And so I've really confused at the gym, right? First thing in the morning, overhead. So I've really confused my brain just based on that angle of light entering my eyes, that it's the middle of the afternoon, basically from when my eyes open until when I choose to turn those lights off at night. And there's very little coordinating that the body can do. There's very little circadian rhythm signaling that the body can sync to when it just thinks it's the middle of the afternoon all the time.
Yeah, so huge. I would imagine that the results would be fairly quick because the body doesn't resist these changes, right? It's craving these things.
It's craving coherence. That's the thing. It's looking for those signals. So my personal experience was after 3 days of being aware of my lighting and my exposure to natural light, and then also being aware of artificial light, within 3 days, it was a shift in energy, focus, digestion, sleep. Puffiness, inflammation. It was an amazing shift. And I'm not alone. I have heard that, probably by now hundreds of times, where within at least like a 3 day to a week-long period of time, people start to say, oh, I think there is something to this. Like, wow, I come inside and now I have more energy. And it's fascinating because I would ask people back before I understood about light. I would ask people the same thing about supplements. It's like, do you think that supplement's working for you? And they're like, sometimes they would know, but sometimes people would be like, maybe not. But like, it's pretty clear when people start to be aware of their light environment, both getting the natural signaling from going outside and blocking the artificial light at night. Try putting on a pair of red toned blue blockers at night and try to stay awake. Right. It's like, so one way or the other, they're going to notice how light has been influencing them and what they can do then to support their bodies.
Yeah, I have a story that I want to share about light at night. So I'm a big turn off all the overhead lights at night, and we have these red bulbs that we turn on so we can kind of make our way around, and we put on our blue blockers after the sun goes down. And we will watch some TV, but not much. And I don't use my computer after a certain hour. And so we end up, one day we have a bunch of guests over, and I'm like, let's go into like dark mode and see how our guests kind of respond to the circumstances. And at first, like everyone was like up in arms. They're like, oh, it's too dark in here, blah, blah. I'm like, guys, like your eyes adjust, like chill out. And after I said, just give me 5 minutes. And then in 5 minutes, if you change your mind, let me know. And then so 5 minutes later, everyone's like so calm, so relaxed. And then I'm like, hey guys, anyone want me to turn the lights on? And everyone's like, no, no, no. Like they instantly shifted their nervous systems and felt the difference. And the delta was so big for them in such a short period of time that of course it piqued their curiosity, but just goes to show you how fast some of these changes can take place. It's almost like watering a plant that's just so thirsty for water. And then within minutes, you see the leaves coming back up again. I feel like human beings are like that too when you expose them to the right type of lighting and the right time of day.
Exactly. Oh, that's such a fun story. I love that. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And then conversely, I find that once people start to get into this idea of understanding light and making a couple of habits, or having a couple of habits throughout the day, that then they don't they don't want to stare at the TV at night watching the football game, at least not without, some significant eye protection and things like that. Because viscerally their body like reacts to like, ooh, whoa, no. So you basically tune the body back to what feels like it's going to bring the body the correct signaling and go back into homeostasis. And then when something is going to push you so far out of homeostasis, like that artificial light from the screen, it's like you actually get a really clear signal, like, no, that doesn't feel good to my body. And so it's cool if people haven't, if there's clinicians here who haven't thought about light in this way, or if there's people listening just on their own healing journey and haven't tried to apply some light strategies, it will speak to you if you're willing to kind of test it out and listen. Because I've never heard someone say, oh, I'm really bummed I take that morning walk, or gosh, I'm done with blocking artificial light at night. Like I've never once heard people say that once they've given it a try.
Yeah, and just to be comical here, but do whatever the opposite of what Bill Gates says to do, right? He's trying to like block the sun. It probably means the sun is good for us.
Right.
We've been conditioned for so many decades to be afraid of the sun and not afraid of our screens. And it really seems like the tables have turned and the sun turns out to be our best friend. And it's our screens and our artificial lighting that can be so disruptive to our health. And when you talk about cortisol, I mean, clinicians know this, but somebody who's not a clinician, when you're making cortisol, you're not making your other growth hormones. And so you become more catabolic, right? So our sex hormones like estrogen, testosterone, they start becoming compromised. And so it goes to, it explains very clearly why, middle-aged men who are working in corporate environments would have low testosterone levels.
Totally. Totally. So we want that one little cortisol surge in the morning, but unfortunately, most people are not actually getting that healthy surge because they're not getting the light signaling. It's that change in light from sunrise till let's say an hour later that really starts to signal that cortisol surge. So they're not getting that morning surge, but instead they're getting these little hits all day long with the blue light from the screen. And you're exactly right. So we're not going to get that morning signaling to sync all of our circadian rhythm to, and instead we're riding these cortisol spikes that not only can wreak havoc on hormones, but they can wreak havoc on blood sugar. That's diabetes, metabolic syndrome, leptin resistance, all these things with that as well, and especially at night. So there's a huge correlation between those blue wavelengths of light, that screen light at night, and driving the epidemics we're seeing of obesity, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and even hormonally driven cancers. So just things to be aware of. And I feel like what I love teaching about this stuff, and I know with you with the breath, right? That's such a beautiful thing to be able to teach, because like that's another one, right? That's actually in my module 1 for practitioners too. I don't teach as well as you, I'm sorry, but that's always with us as well. And so it's like, it's always with us, it's accessible, it's free. There might be a low cost for investing in some blue blockers, but I love teaching about this stuff because I feel like it's so accessible. People just need to know about it.
And the nice thing about, the blue blockers, as you mentioned, is unless you lose them, it's a one-time purchase.
Right.
So, and you can get them in prescriptions, right?
Exactly.
I believe you're wearing Viva Rays, if I'm not
I
mistaken.
am. I'm wearing my good old Viva Rays. Yes, I love these. Great quality, great company. But what I have found too is there is a price point for everyone, right? For these. So this isn't that. So these are just an amazing quality lens. I absolutely love them. All 3 of their lenses. This is their yellows, but their oranges and their reds are phenomenal. And so highly recommend. But at the same time, don't let a price point like that, if that's not in your budget, stop you from trying, because there's some really great ones that we're looking at between like $30 to $40 that can really get you started in understanding how to block the artificial light at night.
When I first started out, I bought those like $11 safety glasses.
Yes, yes. They're $24 now. UVEX, I know. So, but that's what we take with us traveling. I mean, I will bring mine, but for the kids and the family, I'll bring those UVEX safety glasses because they're effective. And yeah, if we leave them somewhere, they break or something like that, I'm not too stressed out about replacing those.
Yeah, and I guess for some people, if they wear glasses, they could wear them over their glasses
They
as
come
well.
in
So,
fit overs, and the UVEX now makes clip-overs.
oh, even better.
Yeah, there
There
you
you go.
go.
There's always a solution for
There's
every
always a
budget.
solution. Yeah.
All right, so we have mindset and we have light.
Yes.
What's the next pillar?
Water. Water is absolutely the next pillar, because this was my aha moment, because I felt the light, like I could viscerally and physically feel the changes in prioritizing morning light signaling. But at the same time, when I understood about how the water in our bodies behaved and how it was a legitimate source of energy, if not actually the main source of energy that our body uses, that was just mind blowing. And then the intersection between how that water interacts with light, it just made perfect sense to me. Have you talked about exclusion zone water on here at all?
No, enlighten us.
Okay, this is so exciting. So the water that I'm referring to in the body was really been studied by a lot of people, but it's been very well studied by a researcher named Dr. Gerald Pollack, who wrote a book called The Fourth Phase of Water, which piqued my curiosity right away, because I had learned that there was only 3 phases of water: liquid, solid, gas. And so I assumed in all of my undergraduate studies and grad school studies, when we were talking about water inside of the cell, I was assuming it behaved very much just like the liquid phase. I mean, I'm not solid, like it's not solid. So I knew I wasn't a solid. I knew I wasn't vapor. So it had to have been just the liquid, like we were talking about liquid in a glass. And it turns out that the water inside of our cells does not behave like that at all. And instead, it's actually very structured and ordered and organized in a way that when you actually assess the texture of it, the viscosity of it, it's more like a gel. And that gel and its structuring gives the water inside of our bodies some very, very amazing, unique properties. So it turns out that when the water inside of our bodies, so this is where it's fun to understand it, because it's, yes, the water that we drink, but we recycle water through a lot of metabolic processes, and we make water inside of our mitochondria at step 4 of the electron transport chain. And all of those sources of water, when that water comes into contact with a hydrophilic surface, a biological surface, so membranes, proteins, cytoskeleton, the organelles themselves, when that water comes into contact with those surfaces, it structures and reorganizes itself into what is theorized to, instead of being H2O anymore, it's now H3O2. It actually, the water links itself together. So if everyone can picture a water molecule, you got an oxygen at the top and then 2 hydrogens kind of coming out from the bottom, forming like an upside down V. And instead of those water molecules interacting willy-nilly, kind of with other water molecules as they would in a glass, they actually organize themselves into hexagons. And so these honeycomb sheets of water molecules linking together gives that water a structure to it that makes it have a gel-like texture, and it gives that water a negative charge, which was the aha moment for me, because that negatively charged water is unusual. If I were just to kind of measure the pH, let's say, or the voltage of water in a glass, liquid water in a glass, it'd be neutral. And to have negatively charged water is like, wait a second, there's a reason. Nature's not stupid. There's a reason why this took place. And it turns out that not only does it have a negative charge, but in order to form that negative charge, the water had to kick out a hydrogen, or a naked hydrogen, if you will. That hydrogen left its electron in that charged water, that negatively charged water, that is called EZ water, or exclusion zone water. So the hydrogen left an electron in that EZ and then lined up directly outside of that exclusion zone to form a proton zone. So everywhere throughout the body, you've got hydrophilic surface or biological surface with this negatively charged structured exclusion zone EZ water, and then a proton zone or a positively charged zone right next to it, which Dr. Pollack's lab has shown many times that if you stick a little electrode in the exclusion zone that's negatively charged and a little electrode in the positively charged proton zone and attach a light bulb, you light the light bulb. And so literally it's energy. And that's why a battery, if anyone takes a battery out in front of them and they look at the battery, it has a positive end and a negative end, because you have to separate the charges. And then when you connect them into a circuit, which for us, that could be proteins or an enzyme, a biochemical reaction pathway, you actually provide the energy that can do work for the cells. And I don't know if you've studied this in undergrad, but I do remember a lot of hearing about pH, right? We need an alkaline pH, or we have this negative energy potential inside of the cell. And I was given a lot of complex biochemical mechanisms, pumping sodium in, pumping potassium in, pumping sodium out, like based on these ion channels. And we actually can simplify that, because a lot of that is just theoretical and has never been proven. It turns out that perhaps a healthy cell is just full of water. And it's this water that has this exclusion zone structure to it and this negative charge that gives the cell its healthy charge, its healthy vitality. And there's so much research to indicate that as cells lose that exclusion zone water, they start to become dysfunctional. So that's the water. And can I talk about really quickly how it interacts with the light?
You must, of course. That was my next question.
So that's the water, right? We're designed to have this negatively charged water inside of us, but naturally, just through the process of utilizing it and just naturally throughout the day, we're designed to maybe lose a little exclusion zone water. These days, living indoors, it actually gets depleted quite a bit. However, there is a wavelength range of sunlight called infrared light. And the sun always contains approximately 40 to 50% infrared light coming from it, regardless of where you live on the planet, time of day, time of year. And it turns out that that's the wavelength range of light that actually, if the exclusion zone is starting to deplete, it expands it back up.
Hmm.
So that is a beautiful thing. Like we're batteries made out of water that are charged by sunlight. And so we go outside, we're getting the circadian signaling, right? We're getting this light signal about the time of day and all the various processes that optimizes. And then we're getting the infrared light into our bodies that then charges this exclusion zone water battery to give our cells the energy and the vitality that they need to do all their tasks.
I love that. Is there a process called sulfation involved in that?
Sulfation, well, there's sulfur, sulfation happens in a couple of ways, but the sulfur, or the sulfate that you're potentially referring to is in the endothelial lining.
Mm.
So there is so inside of our blood vessels, we have this exclusion zone water as well, and it's really rich in sulfate. So the sulfate in the endothelial lining really gels that exclusion zone water. And that sulfation or that sulfate inside of the blood kind of works in contrast to nitric oxide. The sulfate gels the blood, but also can sulfate our hormones, sulfate cholesterol, sulfate our vitamin D, so we can transport it freely through the bloodstream without a carrier. But we don't want to have too much gelled blood, and the sulfate gels things, but the nitric oxide ungels them. So it's this beautiful interplay of how much sulfate to nitric oxide do we need to optimize blood flow, make sure we're sulfating things when we need to as well, and just allow for that beautiful system to take place. And sunlight is the stimulus for balancing that out, both sulfating. So UVA light will build that nitric oxide so we can vasodilate. UVB light allows us to sulfate things so we can transport them through the bloodstream. So again, another interaction with the light and the water.
Yeah, you would think that that ball of fire in the sky has more purpose than just one, right? It's
Like
the
just
source.
to give us
It's the
cancer.
source of everything. Yeah. Or just, you know, it's so interesting how like we've been so conditioned to fear the sun with,
Totally.
and I guess like we have to just err on the side of caution in the sense that you want to be in the sun responsibly, right? We're not saying that,
100%.
it goes without saying, but worth mentioning these days.
Thank
So
you.
don't want anyone being too extreme. And we both live, you're in Michigan, I'm in
Right.
Ontario.
Right.
So we're pretty far north. And I would imagine that we need to get more sunlight. I was telling my wife the other day that we're like literally fish out of water, being ancestrally from India and living in Canada. I mean, it's an uphill battle. And it's so fascinating because a lot of times we see people who come from India who've grown up there their whole lives, and they'll come here and in a year they'll put on 20, 30, 40 pounds.
Right.
They look completely different. They have starting to have chronic pain. I mean, even though they're technically eating the same food, yes, some of it might be the chemicals, but I think a lot of it has to do with just the way their lighting environment is set up, and
Mhm.
also the way that they're not interacting with the sun as much as they should.
Yeah, I agree completely. I've seen that in various populations as well. So, for example, I believe it was the Somalian population that went to northern Minnesota, right? And we saw all of a sudden going from the native homeland where it's really, really heavy in sunlight, and to a much further northern latitude than even I live. And again, within the course of a short period of time, you saw the exact same thing. You saw all of these Western diseases appear. And I'm certain there's more than just the light, but that's a huge change in the light.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a big, what we call epigenetic shift, right? Environmental difference in such a short period of time. So that, in my opinion, something like that has to be a prime driver of what we're seeing and what you're talking about. This also goes, we don't have to go down this rabbit hole, but there's this idea that we have these haplotypes, which means we all have different mitochondria that come along our maternal lineage. And certain people have mitochondria that need more sunlight because that's where they originated. So maybe more equatorial populations need more sunlight, versus people whose mitochondria originated from more northern latitudes. They actually need cold at a certain time of the year because their mitochondria actually do something special in the cold for them. And so there's just whole nother layer to the conversation about the need for sunlight and how it might be individualized for everyone.
Is that a genetic test that someone would do to find that out, or is it just based on eye color, skin color?
No, it's a genetic test. I don't necessarily recommend it anymore. I don't have a I'll put it this way, I don't have a trustworthy source that I could recommend for people to give their DNA to get that test done.
Mm,
I did it a long time ago and found out what mine was, and very many, a lot of people in my community have done the same. So I've gotten enough data from that to know and just see these differences. And it's interesting when people know what their haplotype is, whether they uncouple, it's called, or whether their mitochondria can make heat for them very easily in the cold. That would be the northern latitude haplotypes. We would know then a certain strategy about applying colds to them versus strategies in people who can't necessarily generate heat as efficiently. They actually need a slightly different strategy to thrive in different latitudes.
so just going in the same vein, would it be safe to say that cold plunging is good for some and not for others?
Yeah, I would say well, I would say that everybody can cold plunge because there are benefits to a short cold exposure in terms
Mm,
of things like neurocognition, immune enhancement. But for people who are looking to maybe do longer cold plunges, even 3 to 5 minutes can be too long for some people, especially if they get lower and lower temperatures, because their mitochondria physically can't make enough heat for them to warm up. So their only alternative to warm up after a cold plunge where their body temperature has dropped significantly is to shiver. So it's just a different thing just to pay attention to. So we kind of see these trends on the internet, right, or on social media. Where it's like,
mm.
let me do the 20-day cold plunge challenge for 20 minutes every day. And it's like, okay, but that might not be that might not be the right thing for everyone. I don't recommend that for anyone, but it might not be the right thing for someone, especially who can't uncouple because their body's like, why are you keep putting me in the cold? I can't make the heat for you. Didn't I show you that yesterday and the day before and the day before when I've been shivering afterwards? So yeah, just some more nuance, I think, to that discussion is definitely needed.
Oh man, that's so insightful. Thank you.
Yeah,
Uh,
sure.
so then we have water, and then naturally when you think of water, where my brain goes is what type of water do you drink? So I'm curious if you would enlighten us about what's the best water to drink. And you said something too that I just want to draw people's attention to. You said that we actually make water in the mitochondria, and and so a lot of times we think we have to consume it, consume it. But if we're actually making it, I'm curious about that as well.
Yeah, so I think this was, I know when I was studying the mitochondrial electron transport chain, I was taught that ATP was the primary product that the mitochondria made,
Mm-hmm.
and that water was a byproduct, right? Carbon dioxide kind of overlooked byproducts. And just from my clinical experience, the water and actually the carbon dioxide, but in terms of this talk, the water is, I think, a primary product that the mitochondria are continually trying to do because that water becomes that exclusion zone water, that charged water inside of our bodies. And ATP is needed. ATP actually works to unfold proteins so that they could actually form more exclusion zone water around them. And so there's a whole process that a beautiful researcher named Gilbert Ling, he laid it out point blank with tons of evidence, but because it was inconvenient to think that ATP wasn't the primary energy currency of the cell, so people kind of just swept that under the rug.
We'd have to rename all the supplements.
Right, exactly, exactly. So yeah, so I would say that water that is made in the mitochondria is equally, if not more important than the water that we drink. However, the water we drink does matter. We can't be just drinking a bunch of municipal tap water these days because those contain toxins. And there's things that we can do to restore our water to what I would call a really healthy, vital state that we can then consume for health.
Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, sure, sure. So yeah, I've got I'd say about a 4-step process with this. Number one, I always want to tell people, do with what's within your budget, right? But step one is filter. And the best filters that we could get would be reverse osmosis or distillation, because that really removes everything from the water. But unfortunately, it also strips the water of its minerals. Natural spring water is going to have some minerals in it. And people kind of this I think is a bit challenging for some people because they say, but the minerals don't provide any mineral value for you. It's so little. How could we possibly need minerals in our water? We're getting our minerals from food. And I agree 100%. The minerals have nothing to do with the actual mineral needs for our body. They have to do with the fact that when water has minerals in it, it's better absorbed into the body. I've had countless clients who drink our reverse osmosis water before knowing this. And they say, but I drink 2 liters a day, three liters a day. I still feel dehydrated. I still have headaches. I'm peeing all the time. I've got dry skin. They have histamine reactions, which is another sign of dehydration. And to me, it's like what they start to do is add a couple drops of something like a ocean-based trace minerals or a fulvic or humic-based trace minerals, and all of a sudden they need to drink less water because their body is finally absorbing the water that they're drinking. So
Mm.
filter it, some minerals added back into it, small amounts of minerals. And then I like people to do something to change or reestablish structure in the water, which is a bit out there and woo, but there's a beautiful amount of research on this. And it's the idea that, as I was talking about the water, when it's bonding to other water molecules in a glass in the liquid state, those water molecules, yes, they can look willy-nilly, but they're responsive. Water is actually an antenna. It's a dipole antenna. It's responsive. And so it's looking to pick up energy and information. And it holds energy and information in specific water geometry. So the water molecules bond together in a specific geometry. And that geometry has a vibration, that shape has a vibration associated with it. And so the water has information. This is the principle of homeopathy, right? This is how water can hold that information. And so when water's been pumped through a municipal tap system, we've essentially stripped it of all its structure and we've given it very garbage information. And so by filtering it, by adding minerals back into it, then I want people to structure it. And that can be done with a device such as a vortexer. It can be done with a device such as the analemma wand. People put it in bottles, that the bottles inherently impart structure into the water, such as Flasca or Blue Bottle Love, or I have them use intention, and they can put their own intention into the water. And you'll see if you do different forms of water assessment, you will see that water either have a larger plasma discharge around it in something like a GDV measurement, which measures kind of like the plasma around it, indicate more plasma around an aura or a droplet of water indicates more vitality. So you'll literally see a distilled water drop go from having low vitality to whoosh, this really bright vitality around it. Or you could do a technique such as Veda Austin, who she does a water crystallography where it's more petri dish, large scale structure differences that you could see, but there's a clear difference regardless of how you assess structure in the difference in either the structure or the vitality that you're going to see when you do something like intention or vortexing your water.
You might not know this, but we follow Dr. Emoto's work from many years ago, and he studied, the intention jars, like putting certain words on the jar, positive or negative, would change the way the water structures itself when it freezes. And so we actually many years ago had intention jars made for our clients,
I
and it
love
has
that.
all these positive words and affirmations and stuff on it. And we asked them to drink all their beverages from it. And it's wonderful to hear, the validation of something like that through the science. And it's great to see that, that's one of the ways that we can, if we may not be ready to invest in some of those other tools, I mean, putting that right intention into the water seems to be like it's enough.
It absolutely is. I actually have an amazing story of healing. A woman who found my work and Veda Austin's work at around the same time. Due to a jab injury, she developed multiple, we're talking half a dozen autoimmune conditions. She was on the couch with, she couldn't get up. She had vertigo, headaches. It was just, I mean, she basically just was after her second one, she was just flatlined. And she started to find this information probably about maybe 6 to 8 months into her health challenges. And so her husband would carry her outside at sunrise and at UVA rise. These key times throughout the day that I was teaching my community were really helpful for syncing the circadian rhythm. She was blocking the artificial light at night. She was creating structured water to drink. And then with Veda's technique, she was literally also putting healing intentions into her water. Like basically, water, please, I mean, again, gonna sound crazy, but water, please give me what I need today in order to help support healing. And then with Veda's technique, you freeze the water, and then what she would do is that it creates like a water chip, almost like a big old chip of ice. She would start to eat those, and she would do this time and time again. And honestly, over the course of 6 months of doing the light And that she messaged, I mean, that the day that she came into the community, that one particular day, she was so excited. She's like, I just got all my blood work back from my doctors. I have no more autoimmune markers at all. She's like, the light, the water, if you do trust it, it can be so healing and so powerful. So it was just a beautiful thing to see. And it didn't involve, it didn't involve anything too super complicated, right? It was just the consistency of trusting and utilizing those modalities. It was just such a beautiful story.
It's so remarkable how complicated it is, but how simple it is at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. That's why I love this stuff, because it's simple. I needed the science to start to do it, but it's simple in its application. And so when people do start to apply it, it's pretty easy for them to take something we talked about here. It's going to be easy for someone to say, okay, I'm going to start taking that morning walk, or okay, I'm going to invest in a pair of blue blockers. And you know, it's the shifts can be really profound. So simple, yet I think simple is highly, highly effective.
I love it. So either RO or distilled water, and
Typically
then
the best, yeah.
structuring it. You said there was a device that structures it.
Yeah, so have you heard of the analemma wand before? This little wand here. It's an analemma wand. It's a wand.
Okay.
It's a quartz crystal wand filled with what's called coherent water. So their company is doing a ton of research too on this particular device. The water inside of that wand has gone through a full hydrological cycle on the earth. So that's why spring water has its natural structure in it and natural minerals. And so what they've done is captured some very pristine spring water that has, you know, made its way through, gotten the signature of all the rocks it's gone around, the moonlight, the sunlight, all the seasons, and they've captured it and put it in this. And quartz crystal is the only glass that allows every frequency to pass through. So a window glass will block a lot of the light, you know, but this one will allow all the frequencies to go through. So you essentially just take this wand and stir it into your water for about 10 to 20 seconds. And this water wants to become coherent. So when you give it a coherent source, such as what's in this wand, it gathers that structure and it entrains itself to that structure. And then all of a sudden now drinking water becomes structured.
Wow. How do you spell that?
ANALEMMA.
Okay, cool. I'm learning all kinds of fun stuff. I'll be sure to put this in the show notes for people too.
Cool.
Okay, so now we have water. What's next on the hierarchy?
Well, you know, the third one is just kind of what we've already touched on, and that is how it all intersects with the mitochondria. And mitochondria are bombarded these days with a lot of stressors that prevents them from making that water. And so it's very hard to drink enough water to overcompensate or to overcome that if the mitochondria themselves are dysfunctional. And so that would be like, you know, what makes the mitochondria dysfunctional or unable to make that water? It would be things like indoor living, poor circadian rhythm, because they're looking to the circadian signals coming into our eyes to sync their metabolism up as well. Non-native EMFs, so wireless devices, wireless radiation is a big time stressor to the mitochondria, as is a lot of toxins that we're being bombarded with these days as well. So from fluoride to glyphosate to pretty much, unfortunately, every toxin on the planet, it's going to have a potential impact on the mitochondria. And so we do what we can to minimize toxins, but I find that giving the mitochondria, again, some key signals, and then having maybe couple of additional therapies for people, such as red light therapy, if they need additional light support, because it's the red and the near infrared wavelengths of light are very, very healing and supportive to mitochondrial health. So doing things like that can really help to bring the mitochondria back to their healthy, vital cells. And if anything, get rid of the old mitochondria and even generate new mitochondria that are even better.
What's your take on fasting?
I don't mind fasting but I always look to a marker called leptin to know if fasting is appropriate. Leptin is a master hormone that's secreted by our fat cells, and it's secreted as long as we space our meals out at about the 4-hour mark after a meal. It's secreted from our fat cells and docks into the hypothalamus to give a download of how much energy we have in our bodies. And so it'll say, Carrie's got this much body fat, she's got this much glycogen stored in her liver and her muscles. And so that will dictate things like hunger levels and hormone levels. So basically leptin says, is this a moment in time where Carrie is in a period of scarcity? And if leptin can't download or can't dock, which it won't do when leptin's too high, that's leptin resistant, or too low, that's scarcity, then the body goes into stress default, like survival default. And so it'll downregulate hormones that will improve fertility. It can even it'll downregulate even digestive functions and things like that. And so if someone is low leptin, specifically that in that scarcity mode, I typically don't recommend fasting. But people do fasting. I have had clients do long day, like, 3, 5, even 10-day fasts. We've done both dry fasting and water fasting. I know dry fasting is a bit more controversial, but we've done both of those successfully in my community. And if someone wants to start fasting, I tell them to do a breakfast to breakfast fast, because excuse me, there's 3 things that the body is looking for at the start of the day. It wants to know the time of day, go outside with naked eyes. It wants to geolocate itself on the planet. We have magnetism receptors in our body, magnetite, and the water inside of our bodies. And the Earth's magnetism is different, whether we're at the equator or at the poles. So we want to locate where we are on the planet, and then we want to know we're nourished. And so if we give our body those 3 signals, light, location, and breakfast, basically, we have no problem then going the next day to breakfast and getting all the benefits of autophagy and the healing that could take place in those 24 hours with that kind of a structure.
Okay, so I've heard this before, and I want to. It sounds like you've answered my question, but I just want to clarify. So, would you suggest that if somebody was doing 2 meals a day, and let's say doing a 16/8 fast, that they would be better off eating in the morning and lunch versus lunch and dinner?
Yes, 100%. And I've done both myself. And at first, 16/8 in the fasting until lunch or maybe even 2 p.m. felt good. But I recognized I was riding cortisol and adrenaline, and I could only do that for so long. And so it gave me the awareness of intermittent fasting. But when I shifted my fueling window to an early fueling window, let's say 8 a.m. to 6 hours, 8 hours later, that was the game changer, because I gave my body the safety signals. I gave my body nourishment. I had not only me, but my clients, they'll see hormone regulation happen pretty quickly. And they'll get the benefits of the intermittent fasting. They won't ride the cortisol roller coaster. And the most important thing that people are shocked about is doing it that way lowers evening appetite drastically. So the fear people have is, oh no, I'm going to be starving and hangry and want to eat a bunch of stuff, binge at night. That's the exact opposite happens. People have no hunger in the evening because they've given their body that nourishment in first thing in the morning.
Love it. So let's do this. Let's walk through like what the first half of your day looks like. I'm curious what your morning routine looks like.
Sure.
On a perfect day.
Okay, so they don't exist, right? We do the best we can, but what I do is, if it's before sunrise and I wake up, I have orange tone blue blockers that I wear. At sunrise, if I wake up, then I typically have a nice glass of structured water. I also do a mineral supplement called Quinton minerals. They really mimic the blood in terms of the amount of water they have, the minerals that they have. So they're very beautiful at hydrating after a night of sleep. So I'll have some Quinton minerals. And at sunrise, I'll go outside and I will ground my feet, even if it's the middle of winter, for briefly longer now that it's the middle of summer or almost summer. And so I'll ground, I'll sky gaze, and I have this, I have a prayer, I've got gratitude, I've got intention that I tune into, and I do a little bit of then breath work when I'm outside. And that's how I start my day outside with my light environment. And that can take anywhere from 3 minutes to 30 minutes, depending on the amount of time I have. In an ideal situation, then I go inside, I eat my breakfast. There's typically kid stuff to do and have fun with. And then I love it if I could take a 20 to 60 minute walk during what's called UVA rise. A little later in the day, the sun reaches a little higher point in the sky. At that point, I feel like I am just ready to go. And all of those light signaling, especially at that window of time, that's optimized neurotransmitters. So now I'm focused, I'm ready. Like I got my dopamine, my serotonin, my norepinephrine. I'm ready to sit down and focus for a little while. So then I'll do a couple hours of work. taking little light breaks. I will literally go out for 30 seconds when I can to get these little light breaks. Lunchtime is typically outside, and I will do as much full body sun exposure as I can, 30 minutes, give or take. Then again, another window of time to work, or pick up kids or go to track practice or whatever it is, right? And then, in there, sometimes I'll have dinner, sometimes I won't. It kind of depends. But then as the sun starts to set, I love to be outside on the porch. My husband and I, my kids can be playing in the yard. We'll just see the sunset. I'll come inside. I will put my orange tone blue blockers on and start just kind of my wind down routine, which may involve a little bit more, may involve meditation. It may involve a little bit of just, journaling, stuff like that. But that's like the ideal day when it comes to light. All day long, I'm drinking the water as well, not just in the morning. So I'm drinking about 2 liters of water or so throughout the course of a day. And if I can get more sun exposure on my body and during a day, I will. If I would need to use my red light therapy panel to maybe supplement some, I will. But that's generally what the type of routine that I try to keep.
Okay, I love it. And then what's a typical breakfast for you?
Eggs and sardines.
Nice and simple.
Keep it simple. I will add local seasonal veggies now. So nowadays we'll have the onions, we'll have mushrooms. So I will beef up my eggs depending on kind of the time of year and what's available with the produce. But and then we got some lovely cheese vendors around, cheese farms. And so a little bit of cheese as well. I love eggs and cheese. I could eat that my whole life. I love sardines. I could eat that my whole life. So those are simple. And I've defaulted to those, right? Because you can imagine waking up needing to pack a bunch of lunches for kids. And it's like, what am I going to fuel myself with? And those are really easy things to fuel myself with that I feel like are just super nourishing as well.
So what would you recommend? And this is now getting personal about me. So if you were a vegetarian and didn't eat eggs, what would be a good breakfast in the morning?
Well, what do you like that's protein rich?
I mean, I like nuts.
Okay, great.
So nuts would be one. I mean, I enjoy tempeh or tofu, or I have fava bean tofu. So something like that would be.
Yeah. The basically, for lack of a better, maybe this might be a bit too graphic, but the body wants to know that you've conquered something to eat, right? Grazing is great because there's a lot of stuff that our gut microbiome goes through when we do maybe not necessarily a grazing strategy, but when it's more of like, okay, let me eat nuts and berries for breakfast this time. But there comes, I would say at least 4 days a week, we need to say, here's your nourishment. And so if you can give your body that protein rich breakfast, balanced then in terms of fat and or vegetables based on your leptin levels, your insulin sensitivity, things like that, your activity levels, that right there sets the stage for your body just to say, okay, I'm nourished, right? And then other nourishment that I get through the day is great, but this was the prime thing that I needed to know that I had in my body in order to know that food was available and I've been satisfied.
One of my mentors, Charles Poliquin, would always have people eat meat and nuts for breakfast. That was his jam. So it makes total sense. Healthy fats, good amount of protein, satiate yourself, and then now your body knows it's not in a survival state anymore, right? It's thriving and it's got what it needs to tackle the rest of the day. That makes total sense.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know Charles taught that. That's so cool.
I know our time is almost up, and I'd love to allude to a part 2 if you're open to it, because there's so much more that I'd love to go down this rabbit hole with you. We covered a lot today, and is there anything I didn't ask you that I should have, or anything that you really feel people need to hear?
No, I just want people to recognize that to keep it simple, right? Just start just interacting outside more, getting into the natural light, naked eyes, right? No sunglasses, if at all possible. So that natural light signaling is getting into those eyes. And yeah, just start doing a little more in the morning, especially, right? That morning light is precious. Those changes are precious in terms of how those wavelengths shift and change. And we're keying in on all of those different changes to optimize our physiology. So if you prioritize something in the morning and then make it darker at night, block that artificial light at night, it's a perfect place to get started with all of this.
Amazing. One thing I've always thought about is creating a track, and on that track would be a traveling bulb, and it would position itself with exactly where the sun is. And so as the sun was setting, it would set on the wall. Uh, we'll have to see how feasible something like that is. And it would be,
Right.
starting in the east and going towards the west.
I love it. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. These days, though, they don't let us put any of that beautiful infrared into our bulbs, so we'd have to do a workaround there.
Yeah. I know Rudy's working on that. So
Is
maybe
he?
maybe they'll
Oh,
have a
that's
solution. Yeah.
exciting. Cool. Cool. That'll be
Yeah.
exciting to see.
So I've got a link I'm going to share with everyone. If you want to learn more, well, you should want to learn more about this work because it's so fascinating. Carrie has a very inspiring business model, and it's inspired me to want to give more. And the way well, I'll let you share how it works, and then we'll share
Sure.
the link to where people can find your work.
Yeah, sure. So, we've decided to go to a pay what you want model for all of my courses, whether they're my courses for individuals or for practitioners, because I just never liked the idea of selling stuff. And I just want this information to get into the hands of as many people as possible. And so this just gives me the motivation to come on, like that. Thank you for this opportunity. Come on podcasts and just share abundantly and know that people have access. Then, if they want to learn more, there's no restrictions for people. You can literally go and get these courses for whatever is financially feasible for you. Because I think this is really truly how we shift things for people. We have to get ourselves back into our natural human environment, which is nature. And I don't want there to be any roadblocks in that. So consider it kind of like a gift, but I think that people will be giving back in getting healthier and paying this forward to other people and teaching this and just letting this message spread far and wide.
I love it. Beautiful. You've certainly inspired me. I'm excited for a follow-up conversation. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And here's to both of us getting outside, getting some sunlight, and watching the sunset tonight.
Love it. Thank you, Sachin.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. And thank you all for tuning in. I'm certain you enjoyed our conversation today. I'll drop some links of some of the products and items that were mentioned. And of course, Carrie's work. Check it out. You're going to be blown away with what she has to offer. And you could just tell about how you could just see how enthusiastic she is about that. And that's what really lights me up as well, is to see someone who's so passionate, getting the message out there to the world, and essentially making it accessible to every single person. So thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you.